The screens went black at exactly 3:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every ATM from Maine to California displayed the same cryptic message: "System temporarily unavailable. Please contact your financial institution." Within minutes, the Dow Jones Futures Market plummeted 800 points. By dawn, citizens across America would be lined up outside banks, their faces etched with the same terror their grandparents had worn in 1929. But 12 hours earlier, Marcus Chen had been nothing more than a quiet man in a wheelchair, monitoring cybersecurity protocols in the sterile basement of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The hum of servers filled the air around him as he methodically checked firewall logs, his fingers dancing across 3 monitors with practiced efficiency. At 34, Marcus had dedicated 8 years to protecting America's financial infrastructure, his disability never once hindering his ability to spot threats that others missed. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his workstation, illuminating the collection of small succulents he kept on his desk. Each plant represented a different security system he maintained, his own private garden in the windowless depths of Federal Reserve operations. Marcus adjusted his thick-rimmed glasses and leaned closer to the center screen, where an unusual pattern in the network traffic had caught his attention. "Interesting," he murmured to himself, tracing the data flow with his index finger. The anomaly was subtle, almost elegant in its design. Someone with considerable skill had been probing the system's defenses, testing for weaknesses without triggering the standard alarms. His phone buzzed against the metal desk. Marcus glanced at the caller ID and felt his stomach tighten. Karen Westfield, his former colleague from the private sector, the woman who had made his last job a living hell before he found sanctuary at the Fed. He let it go to voicemail. Then another call came through immediately. "What could she possibly want?" Marcus whispered, declining the call again. The third call came from a blocked number. Against his better judgment, Marcus answered. "Hello, Marcus." Karen's voice dripped with false sweetness. "Miss me?" "Karen, how did you get this number? This is a secured line." "Oh, I have my ways. Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. You're about to become very famous." The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, a chill running down his spine despite the warm air circulating through the server room. Karen Westfield had been his supervisor at Cybertech Solutions 2 years ago, before budget cuts had forced him to seek employment elsewhere. She had systematically undermined his work, questioned his competence in front of clients, and made snide comments about accommodation costs. When Marcus finally reported her behavior to HR, she had retaliated by filing a false performance review that nearly destroyed his career. He pushed thoughts of Karen from his mind and returned to the anomalous network traffic. The pattern was becoming clearer now. Someone had been mapping the Federal Reserve's internal systems with surgical precision. This wasn't random cybercriminal activity. This was reconnaissance. Marcus began documenting his findings, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he compiled evidence of the intrusion attempts. The timestamp showed the probes had been occurring for weeks, always during shift changes when attention might be diverted. Whoever was behind this understood the Fed's operational rhythms intimately. At 11:23 p.m., Marcus's secure terminal chimed with an urgent system alert. His blood ran cold as he read the message. "Critical security breach detected in primary transaction processing core. Immediate containment protocols activated." This was it. The probing had been preparation for something much larger. Marcus immediately initiated emergency procedures, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He activated the incident response system, sending automated alerts to his supervisors and the Federal Reserve's cybersecurity task force. Then, He began the painstaking process of isolating the affected systems, cutting off the intrusion before it could spread further into the network. The next few minutes passed in a blur of commands, diagnostic scans, and rapid-fire communications with his team. Marcus had dealt with attempted breaches before, but nothing of this magnitude. The attacker had somehow bypassed multiple layers of security, gaining access to core financial processing systems that handled trillions of dollars in daily transactions. As he worked to contain the breach, Marcus noticed something peculiar. The attack pattern looked familiar. Too familiar. The methodology. The specific vulnerabilities being exploited. Even the timing of the assault. It reminded him of something he had seen before. In training simulations he had helped design during his time at Cybertech. His phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed 911 Emergency Services. "Sir, this is Detective Rodriguez with the NYPD. We've received reports of suspicious activity at your location. Are you currently at the Federal Reserve Bank?" Marcus felt confused. "Yes, I'm at work. I'm actually dealing with a cybersecurity incident right now. How did you—" "Sir, I need you to remain calm and stay on the line. We have credible information that you may be involved in sabotage activities against the Federal Reserve's computer systems." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "What? No, that's impossible. I'm the one trying to stop the attack. I'm the cybersecurity analyst who detected—" "Sir, we have recordings of phone calls detailing your plans to disrupt the financial system. The caller provided specific information about your access credentials and your intentions to cause widespread economic damage." Marcus's mind raced. Karen. It had to be Karen. But how could she know about the breach unless she was involved? "Detective, I think you need to trace those calls. Someone is setting me up. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm trying to prevent a catastrophic attack on our financial infrastructure." "Sir, federal agents are en route to your location. Please remain at your workstation and keep your hands visible." The line went dead, leaving Marcus in stunned silence. Around him, the servers continued their electronic humming, oblivious to the chaos unfolding. He looked at his screens, where the cyber attack was still in progress, systems crashing one by one as the malicious code spread through the Federal Reserve's network. Marcus realized with growing horror that he was trapped. If he continued working to stop the attack, he would appear to be actively sabotaging the system. If he stopped, the attack would succeed, causing untold damage to the American economy. Either way, he would be blamed. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside the server room. Marcus could hear multiple voices, urgent and authoritative. Federal agents, just as the detective had promised. He took a deep breath and made his choice. He would continue fighting the cyber attack, regardless of the consequences. The integrity of America's financial system was more important than his own freedom. The server room door burst open with a metallic crash. 6 federal agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Hands up, move away from the computer. Step back from the terminal immediately. You are under arrest for suspected cyber terrorism." Marcus raised his hand slowly, his wheelchair-bound form hardly intimidating. Yet the agents treated him like a dangerous criminal. "Please, you don't understand. I'm trying to stop an attack, not cause one. The real perpetrator is still out there." Special Agent Jennifer Walsh stepped forward, her voice firm but not unkind. "Mr. Chen, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Agent Walsh read him his rights, Marcus watched helplessly as the cyber attack continued to ravage the Federal Reserve systems. On his monitors, he could see transaction processing centers going offline one by one. The attack was specifically designed to create maximum chaos, wiping transaction logs, corrupting backup systems, and triggering automatic security shutdowns that would paralyze the entire network. "You're making a terrible mistake," Marcus said quietly. "While you're arresting me, the real attacker is destroying our financial infrastructure. In a few hours, ATMs across the country will stop working. Electronic payments will fail. The markets will collapse." Agent Walsh hesitated for a moment, studying Marcus's face. "We have detailed reports of your planned attack, Mr. Chen. Phone calls describing exactly what we're seeing here." "What did these phone calls say? Did they mention specific technical details? Timelines? Methods?" "The caller knew about your access credentials, your work schedule, even the specific systems you manage." Marcus felt a spark of hope. "Agent Walsh, that information proves I'm being framed. Only someone with intimate knowledge of Federal Reserve operations could provide those details. And only someone with my exact security clearance could plant malware this deep in our systems." Agent Walsh exchanged glances with her colleagues. The logic was sound, but they had explicit orders to treat Marcus as the primary suspect. "We'll sort this out at the field office," she said finally. "Right now, our priority is containing this attack." As they prepared to escort Marcus from the server room, alarms began blaring throughout the Federal Reserve building. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in ominous red as automated systems detected the spreading cyber attack. The scope of the damage was becoming clear. This wasn't just an assault on one regional bank, but a coordinated attack on the entire Federal Reserve network. Marcus was processed and held in a federal detention facility as the crisis unfolded around him. Through the small television in the holding area, he watched news reports describing the worst financial disruption in American history. ATMs had gone dark nationwide. Electronic payment systems were failing. Banks were unable to access customer account information or process transactions. The president addressed the nation at 6 a.m., declaring a financial emergency and assuring citizens that the government was working around the clock to restore normal operations. But behind the scenes, chaos reigned. The Federal Reserve's backup systems had been compromised just as thoroughly as the primary network. Years of transaction data had been corrupted or destroyed entirely. Financial markets around the world were in free fall. The London Stock Exchange suspended trading after a 1,000-point drop in the FTSE 100. Tokyo followed suit as panic selling overwhelmed the system. Central banks from Frankfurt to Sydney were struggling to maintain liquidity as the contagion spread through interconnected global markets. In his cell, Marcus felt sick watching the destruction unfold. He knew the Federal Reserve systems better than almost anyone, and he could see exactly how the attack had been orchestrated. The perpetrator had used his own security protocols against the system, turning the Fed's defensive mechanisms into weapons of mass financial destruction. Late that evening, Agent Walsh returned to the detention facility with unexpected news. "Mr. Chen, we need to talk. Our digital forensics team has made some interesting discoveries." She led him to an interview room where FBI cybercrime specialists had set up a mobile command center. Laptops and monitors covered every available surface, displaying network diagrams and code analysis that Marcus recognized from his own work. "We've been analyzing the malware that infected the Federal Reserve systems," Agent Walsh continued. "The attack code contains embedded signatures that trace back to your former employer, Cybertech Solutions." Marcus leaned forward eagerly. "I knew it. Karen Westfield had access to all of our security protocols when I worked there. She must have modified the training simulations we designed. There's more. We've traced the phone calls that reported your alleged terrorist activities. They didn't come from New York. They originated from an encrypted VoIP service routing through servers in Eastern Europe. Agent Walsh pulled up a world map showing the call's digital path. The caller used sophisticated voice modification software to disguise their identity, but our audio analysis suggests the speaker was a middle-aged woman with a Midwestern accent. Karen grew up in Ohio, Marcus said immediately, and she studied abroad in Prague during college. She would know how to route communications through European servers. Special Agent David Kim, the FBI's lead cybercrime investigator, joined the conversation. Mr. Chen, we need your help. The attack is still ongoing. Even though we've isolated the main intrusion, the malware is designed to resurface periodically, corrupting different systems each time. Without someone who understands the Federal Reserve's architecture intimately, we may not be able to fully eliminate the threat. Marcus didn't hesitate. What do you need me to do? Over the next 18 hours, Marcus worked alongside FBI agents and Federal Reserve technicians to dismantle the cyber attack piece by piece. The malware was incredibly sophisticated, designed to hide in the most obscure corners of the network and emerge when detection protocols were at their weakest. As they worked, more evidence of Karen's involvement emerged. Financial records showed she had made several large cryptocurrency transactions in the weeks leading up to the attack, converting her savings into untraceable digital assets. Travel records indicated she had flown to Prague just days before the assault began, ostensibly for a cybersecurity conference that turned out to be fictitious. The breakthrough came when FBI agents raided Karen's apartment in Chicago, hidden in her home office. They discovered detailed architectural diagrams of Federal Reserve systems, stolen access credentials, and a burner phone that matched the device used to make the false 911 reports. But Karen herself was nowhere to be found. She's not just trying to frame me, Marcus realized as he studied the evidence. This whole attack was designed to do maximum damage to the Federal Reserve's credibility. She wanted to prove that our cybersecurity was fundamentally flawed. Agent Walsh nodded grimly. We found her personal files. She's been obsessed with exposing what she calls systemic vulnerabilities in American financial infrastructure. She believed that only a catastrophic attack would force the government to implement proper security measures. So she decided to sacrifice the entire economy to make her point, Marcus said quietly. And she was perfectly willing to destroy my life in the process. As the FBI manhunt for Karen intensified, Marcus continued working to repair the damaged systems. The task was monumental, not just restoring functionality, but ensuring that every trace of malicious code had been eliminated. The malware had been designed to hide itself across thousands of servers, lying dormant until specific trigger conditions were met. 3 days after the initial attack, a major breakthrough occurred. NSA analysts intercepted encrypted communications from a server farm in Prague, messages that contained detailed information about Federal Reserve operations that only Karen could have known. The communications were traced to a specific location, a former Soviet-era bunker that had been converted into a high-security data center. Czech authorities, working with American agents, raided the facility at dawn local time. Karen was found in a subterranean control room, surrounded by monitors displaying real-time feeds from news networks around the world. She had been watching the chaos unfold from her underground hideout, orchestrating additional phases of the attack through encrypted channels. The arrest was broadcast live on international television. Karen Westfield, dressed in a wrinkled black sweater and jeans, was led away in handcuffs as FBI agents seized computers containing terabytes of stolen Federal Reserve data. Her elaborate plan had finally come to an end, but not before causing hundreds of billions of dollars in economic damage. With Karen in custody, Marcus was able to fully understand the scope of her sabotage. She had spent months infiltrating Federal Reserve systems, using his old security protocols as a roadmap. Every defensive measure he had helped design had been turned against the institution he was sworn to protect. She knew exactly how I would respond to different types of attacks. Marcus explained to congressional investigators during emergency hearings. She designed the malware to exploit my standard procedures, making it appear that I was the one causing the damage. The Senate Banking Committee convened extraordinary sessions to examine the crisis and its implications for American financial security. The hearings were broadcast live across the nation, with Marcus serving as the star witness who had helped save the system from complete collapse. Senator Patricia Williams, the committee chairwoman, leaned forward as Marcus testified from his wheelchair at the witness table. "Mr. Chen, in your professional opinion, how close did we come to a complete systemic failure?" Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "Senator, if the attack had been allowed to continue for another 12 hours, we would have faced the complete collapse of electronic banking in America. Every ATM, every credit card transaction, every electronic funds transfer would have been compromised. We came within hours of returning to a cash-only economy." The hearing room fell silent as the full implications of his words settled over the assembled senators and journalists. This had not been just another cyber crime, but an attack on the very foundation of modern American commerce. And yet, Senator Williams continued, "You continued working to prevent this catastrophe, even while under arrest for allegedly causing it. Why?" "Because my personal situation was irrelevant compared to the welfare of the American people." Marcus replied simply, "I took an oath to protect our financial infrastructure. That oath didn't become void just because someone was trying to frame me." Senator James Harrison, the ranking Republican member, addressed Marcus with obvious respect. "Mr. Chen, what safeguards do you recommend to prevent similar attacks in the future?" Marcus had prepared extensively for this question. "We need to implement multi-person authentication for all critical system changes, regardless of security clearance. We need better behavioral analysis algorithms to detect insider threats. And we need redundant oversight systems that can't be compromised by any single individual, no matter how much access they have." The hearings continued for 3 days, with Marcus providing detailed technical testimony about the attack and recommended improvements to Federal Reserve cybersecurity. His expertise and calm professionalism under pressure made him a compelling witness, and public opinion gradually shifted from viewing him as a suspected terrorist to recognizing him as a hero who had prevented complete economic catastrophe. Karen's trial began 6 months later in federal court in Manhattan. The charges against her were severe cyber terrorism, economic sabotage, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Forensic analysis had traced every piece of malicious code back to her systems, and recorded communications showed her coordinating the attack from her Prague hideout. During the trial, Karen's defense attorney attempted to portray her actions as whistleblowing rather than terrorism. "My client believed she was exposing critical vulnerabilities in America's financial infrastructure," the lawyer argued. "Her intentions were to strengthen our cybersecurity, not to destroy our economy." But the prosecution, led by U.S. Attorney Sarah Chen, painted a different picture. The defendant didn't just expose vulnerabilities. She exploited them to cause massive harm. She didn't report her concerns to appropriate authorities. She used them to launch the most damaging cyber attack in American history. And she didn't take responsibility for her actions. She attempted to frame an innocent man for her crimes. Marcus testified at the trial, describing in detail how Karen had systematically stolen his security protocols and used them against the Federal Reserve. His testimony was devastating, not just because of the technical evidence he presented, but because of the personal betrayal it revealed. Karen Westfield was my supervisor, Marcus told the jury. I trusted her with sensitive information about cybersecurity vulnerabilities because I believed we were working together to protect American financial institutions. Instead, she was using that information to plan the most destructive attack possible. Karen showed no remorse during the trial, often smirking when particularly damaging evidence was presented. When she finally took the stand in her own defense, her testimony was defiant and unrepentant. I proved that the Federal Reserve's cybersecurity was fundamentally flawed, she declared. If I could penetrate their systems, so could foreign governments, terrorist organizations, or criminal syndicates. I forced them to confront their vulnerabilities. At what cost? The prosecutor asked during cross-examination. Hundreds of billions in economic damage, millions of Americans unable to access their own money, global financial markets in chaos. Sometimes radical action is necessary to create meaningful change, Karen replied coldly. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Karen was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Additional charges were filed by European authorities for her activities in Prague, ensuring she would face justice on multiple continents. As the verdicts were read, Marcus felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but the damage Karen had caused would take years to fully repair. The American people's confidence in their financial system had been shaken, and implementing the necessary security improvements would cost billions of dollars. In the months following the trial, Marcus became something of a reluctant celebrity. He was invited to speak at cybersecurity conferences around the world, sharing his insights about defending critical infrastructure against insider threats. The Federal Reserve promoted him to Director of Advanced Threat Detection, making him one of the youngest senior officials in the organization's history. More importantly, Congress passed comprehensive cybersecurity legislation based largely on Marcus's recommendations. The Financial Infrastructure Protection Act required all major banks and financial institutions to implement multi-person authentication systems, behavioral analysis protocols, and redundant oversight mechanisms designed to prevent future attacks. President Martinez personally awarded Marcus the Presidential Medal of Freedom in a ceremony at the White House. In America's darkest financial hour, Marcus Chen stood between our economy and complete collapse, the president said during the presentation. His courage, expertise, and unwavering dedication to duty saved millions of Americans from economic catastrophe. Standing in the Rose Garden, surrounded by senior government officials and financial industry leaders, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. Less than a year ago, he had been a quiet cybersecurity analyst working in the basement of the Federal Reserve. Now, he was a national hero, recognized for preventing one of the most devastating economic attacks in American history. But Marcus knew that his real victory wasn't the medal or the recognition. It was the knowledge that American families could trust their banks again, that electronic payments worked reliably, and that the financial infrastructure he protected was stronger than ever before. In his acceptance speech, Marcus spoke directly to the American people. This attack taught us that our most dangerous enemies may not be foreign governments or international terrorist organizations. Sometimes they are people we know, people we trust, people who use our confidence against us. But it also taught us that When we work together, law enforcement, cybersecurity professionals, government officials, and ordinary citizens, we can overcome any threat. After the ceremony, Marcus returned to his enhanced office at the Federal Reserve, where a team of analysts now worked under his supervision to monitor potential threats around the clock. The server room had been completely redesigned with new security protocols, but Marcus still kept his collection of small succulents on his desk, a reminder of the quiet dedication that had ultimately saved America's financial system. The plants had grown considerably during the months of crisis and recovery, their resilient green leaves reaching toward the fluorescent lights above. Like the American economy itself, they had survived a catastrophic attack and emerged stronger than before. Marcus smiled as he settled into his wheelchair and began reviewing the day's security reports. Somewhere in federal prison, Karen Westfield was beginning a 35-year sentence for her crimes. But here, in the heart of America's financial system, Marcus Chen was ensuring that nothing like her attack could ever succeed again. The screen showed steady, normal traffic across the Federal Reserve network. ATMs were functioning perfectly. Electronic payments were processing without delay. Markets were stable, and confidence was restored. It was exactly as it should be, and Marcus intended to keep it that way for the rest of his career. Outside his office window, New York City bustled with its usual energy. Millions of people were conducting financial transactions, trusting that their money was safe and their payments would go through without incident. They would never know how close they had come to losing it all, or how one man in a wheelchair had stood between them and economic disaster. Marcus preferred it that way. Heroes didn't need recognition to do their jobs. They just needed the knowledge that their work mattered, that their vigilance protected something larger than themselves. As evening approached and his shift neared its end, Marcus completed his final security scan of the day. Every system was operating normally. Every transaction was processing correctly. Every safeguard was functioning as designed. He powered down his monitors with satisfaction, knowing that when he returned tomorrow, America's financial infrastructure would still be secure. Karen's attack had ultimately failed because it had underestimated the resilience of both the system and the people who protected it. Marcus gathered his things and headed for the elevator, leaving behind the quiet hum of servers that never slept. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats to monitor and defend against. But tonight, America could rest easy, knowing that its financial system was in capable hands. The lights dimmed automatically as Marcus left the server room, but the computers continued their vigilant watch over the nation's economic lifeline. In the digital realm, where battles were fought with code instead of weapons, the Guardians never rested. And neither would Marcus Chen, America's unlikely hero in the war against financial terrorism.